I'm Chris.
And I'm Craig. And today we're going to be going over the setup and calibration of a Dewalt DW716 12-inch miter saw.
And also the setup of a zero clearance fence.
In order to better illustrate the adjustment points for this particular Dewalt model, we've removed the zero clearance fence. And from what you can see here is Dewalt provides a single plate with all the degrees of different set points attached to one single plate that can be removed by adjusting these 3 Torx screws. What you'll see here is that you have plenty of room for adjustment along that axis, but once you have that 0 point set, all your other angles are set. So this plate is the key feature for adjusting your horizontal bevel. Dewalt has nicely provided, attached to the miter saw, a Torx end socket screw for this particular model. Torx is used for these Torx screws right here so that we can adjust our angles, and then the socket is used for our minute adjustment on our vertical bevel along this socket, as well as the removal and installation of the blade. In order to adjust the horizontal angle, we'll be using a framing square. We've had this square in the shop and we know that it's fairly accurate. First step, make sure you unplug your saw. Super important, safety first. Second step, we're going to go ahead and loosen up those 3 bolts that we showed you earlier. So take that nice little included torque wrench and get it in there and loosen those bolts up. They don't have to be super loose, just get them to the point where you're going to be able to slide that plate back and forth. At that point, we're going to set it back to our 0 degree angle and drop the blade. Push the pin in the back, make sure that it's locked in place. This allows us to adjust the entire saw based off of how the square lines up with the fence. We're going to use this square to get as close as we possibly can. From there, we're going to do some test cuts and make sure that we're as accurate as possible. Remember, it may not be exactly perfect as you have the cutting tips on your saw blade as well, so try to remember to take that into account. Once you get that as close as possible, you're going to take that same screw and tighten the 2 on the far edges as tight as you possibly can, and then from there, you remove your square, swing the blade, and tighten that 3rd screw up. At that point, we can set it back to the 0 mark.
On to the bevel adjustment. So on the saw here, there's a screw in the back, unscrew it, and it bevels the one direction. There's also a little pull handle in order to pull the handle out, and then it'll actually bevel in your 2nd direction. That's what makes the saw extremely nice. Click it back, bring it to 0, re-tighten it down. Now Dewalt from the factory did a really good job on getting it pretty zeroed up, but when we do our test cuts here next, we might have to use the nice little wrench they included in order to fine tune that bevel, and you'll see next with our test cuts on how we're actually going to do that, and it might be perfect from the factory. Here's hoping. Now it's time for the horizontal test cut. I'm using a piece of 5 3/4 1/2-inch white melamine just because I had it laying around. You could use a piece as wide as your saw would cut. That would work very well as well, but for demo purposes, 5 3/4 it is. After I've made the cut, flip the piece upside down, put it together, and see what kind of gap you got. Very minor. It's a miter saw. I'm very happy with that. Anything closer, probably want to use the table saw. For example, if your saw is not at 90, we set the saw at 1 degree. Flip it over, and we got ourselves a really nice gap. Now for the bevel test cut, we do this very similar thing, stand it up on end. Flip it upside down, run it through. Very minor. There is a little bit there, but it's nothing I'm going to worry about. Once again, any more accurate, probably should go to the table saw.
All right, now that we're done calibrating the saw, we're going to move on to our zero clearance fence. We really like to use 1/2 inch Baltic birch for this particular situation. It works out fantastic. Baltic birch always comes sanded. It's a very smooth finish, and we like to use that for our fence as it gives us a really nice glide. In this particular situation, we're going to use a 5-inch cut. It's perfect for the height of this saw. So we're going to set our table saw up to give us a nice, clean, straight edge. Go ahead and measure it out, or in this case, we have our fence already pre-calibrated. Sliding on over to 5 inches. Set that bad boy up. Lock it down. We're going to run our rig. The other thing we really like to do on this project is we like to take our trim router and set it up with a 1/16 round over bit. We're going to take that and we're going to run that down the length of our fence. What that's going to do is it's going to give us a really great place for all that fine sawdust as we make our cuts to exit the cut. If you don't have that cut on there, it's going to pack in, and every piece of wood you try and slam up in there is going to have the wrong degree to it.
After we made our cut on the table saw and did our 16-inch round over, time to install it actually on the fence itself. I already have it installed here, so put the wood down with the round over bit on the base. Drew a couple little pencil marks in there and actually used a tapered bolt with a lock nut that I countersunk into the wood on here, so it's flushed up and you don't have any wood catching on it, just a little bit underneath. The length of the boards we usually do is about 15 inches a piece. I found that's a pretty good board. We can set them back a little bit so we have plenty of room for error. So the reason why I make the boards 15 inches a piece is I set the factory fence, I slide it back a little bit and actually have a gap. Usually I slide it back about 2.5 inches. So then if the saw does come uncalibrated for some reason, rolls around in the truck, it's all happened to us, you can actually slide it back forward and redo your cut. It's now cut time. So I have the left side of the fence over my line, loosen that, slide this one so it slams up to the left side. So now, as you can see here, we have a nice smooth flat surface. We're going to lock the fence down and go ahead and make our cut. So when we make this cut, it's going to be the exact width or the kerf of the blade, which gives us our zero clearance. And the whole point to the zero clearance insert, as you can see right after we made our cut, is the dreaded tear out. So the reason we have the insert on here is so all this tear out here doesn't happen to your nice finished piece of maple or whatever that you just cut down. Now, one of the main bonuses that I find on the zero clearance fence is when you're trying to actually cut your board. Normally, mark out your board, drop your saw blade, kind of hold it there, shimmy it back and forth to try to find exactly where it is to cut. With the fence, just mark it. Say we want 6 inches. Line it up to the fence, and your cut is on the money. Some of you are probably wondering, the zero clearance insert works really good for 0 degree cuts, but what if you're doing trim? So I made a second piece that had the 45 cuts on it. So when you're doing casing, baseboard, etc., your 45s are all set up, and it's just a simple matter of swapping your bolts out, 16th inch round over, and you're good to go.
That's all we have, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys want to subscribe to us, that'd be fantastic. We're going to be doing a lot more projects in the future. If there's anything you want to see, by all means, ask for it down below. We'll do our best to get that to you. We are not going to only do calibration and setup videos. We're going to start showing you a lot of the crazy projects that we're working on. We got a wine fridge coming up. We're doing a fire and ice table. We're doing all sorts of crazy little projects that we work on a lot. So by all means, hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you need. Thanks a lot.